Howdy, folks, and welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast. I'm your host, Michael, and we got a good one for you today. Today, we actually connected with one of our listeners, Gard. Cole reached out to me and said he's got a couple of stories that he hopes no other hunter ever has to deal with or live through, and that piqued my interest. So we had Cole jump on, and he did not disappoint. He has some great stories. He's from Illinois, and he's got some great whitetail stories. Even has some good Western big game stories. So I want to thank Cole, of course, for coming on the podcast. Of course, thank you all for tuning in and listening to the podcast. And don't forget to at least share with one person today so we can keep growing it and keep having more listeners like Cole come and share their stories. So thanks again, guys. Now let's go ahead and let Cole tell you his stories. All right, Cole. Welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast, brother. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. Actually, you know what? I'm doing great. Let's go with that because I got you here to tell me some of your favorite hunting stories. Just so that people know you are another listener that reached out to me saying, I've got some stories. I got some stories that I hope no other hunter ever has to live. And, that piques some interest. So I'm glad that you're here, man. I'm super excited to hear what you have for us today. But let's kick this thing off by letting you introduce yourself to the folks that you're about to tell some stories to.
Yeah, so my name's Gard. I'm from a small southern town in Illinois, about 25 minutes east of St. Louis. And I've been hunting probably since I was like 10 years old. Started with the small stuff like rabbits, squirrels, dove, that kind of stuff. And so then I got my hunting license because, when you're a kid, you don't think that hunting licenses exist. But anyway,
it's a good point.
So got my hunting license when I think I was 12, and the first season that was open was turkey season. And to make a long story short, I killed 2 turkeys with one shot my first. Oh yeah, it was wild.
That's crazy. So let me ask you a couple questions. Who got you into hunting? Was it just something your family did, or were you like the first hunter in the family?
So my dad got me into it. He's always been big into it, and his dad taught him how to when he was young, and it just kind of went down the family tree a little bit. So kind of the typical, introduction to hunting.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, man. Yeah, I wish. And then do you want to go any more into that story about your first time hunting and knocking down the 2 turkeys? If not, it reminded me of a story that I can tell from a buddy of mine, but you get to go first.
Yeah. So it was public land because we never really had any private to hunt, at least none that was worth hunting. But it kind of went how you would want a turkey hunt to go. We set up, I think 2 or 3 decoys out in this field, and we had roosted the birds the evening before. And perfect. I mean, opening morning, there was like fog and it was real misty, cloudy. I mean, perfect scenery for, a couple of gobblers come flying down. And sure enough, that's what happened. 3 of them flew down and landed right in the decoys, and only one of them walked out.
That's so crazy, man. Yeah. So I've told the story about my turkey in Texas where my bow, I go full draw and my arrow falls off my nock, and I'm like trying to and get my buddy to come and re-nock it. I've told that story before. I'm not sure if I've told the story of that buddy then later that day. So I was showing him the ropes, and by no means am I a turkey hunting expert, but I was like, here's what I know. And it worked. So he's like, okay, well, can I borrow this little, it's not even a blind. It's just basically a canopy that you put in front of you. Right. And I've got some decoys, and he's like, can I borrow this stuff and a slate call? And I'm like, yeah, man, of course. Just when you're done, bring it back. So it's midday. I have to go home. He has to go to work, but he's like, after work, before the sun goes down, I'm going to set up again, and I'm going to try and get some turkeys. And I'm like, all right, well, good luck. And we've been there for a couple hours and seen 1 bird, 2 birds, maybe. So I knew there were birds everywhere, but I wasn't sure if he was going to have too much luck. Either way, he goes and he sets up and he starts to do his little slate call. And, he'd literally never done it before that day when I showed him how. And 3 birds come in, and they're jakes. And we're talking South Texas. And in South Texas, I think you get like 4 turkey tags or something like that when you put in a license. Yeah, you get a crazy amount. And he goes and he's like, all right. And I was archery. He was shotgun. So he pulls up and he shoots and poof, drops 2 of them, just like you, right? And then the other one, the third one, doesn't go anywhere. So he's like, all right, well, I'll shoot it too. So and he shoots the third turkey.
Oh my
So
God.
in a matter of like 5 seconds, he kills 3 turkeys. And I'm sitting there like talking to him on the phone as he's telling me this story. And I'm like, let me look into this. And I look at all the other states and how many turkey tags you get. And like from a legality standpoint, he may have done something that no one's ever done before, which is kill 3 turkeys like instantly in season with tags. Like he did everything legally by the book and dropped 3 turkeys in like under 5 seconds, which is just insane.
Oh yeah, unheard of for sure.
Yeah. Which it's funny because it's like he's killed as many turkeys as I have, and it's taken me 3 years. It took him, 10 minutes. So
Yeah, it's funny. Like turkeys are the smartest, dumbest animals you'll ever see. Like
that's so
they're
true. They make you feel so stupid.
oh yeah, like they are so dumb, but then they do some things that you're like, what? Like how could your small brain even think to do that? And they do
Yeah.
it.
Yep. I believe it, man. I believe it. All right, cool. Well, Cole, it's nice to meet you. I'm glad that you're on the podcast. And I know that I kind of forced you into that first turkey story and then gave you one of my own. But you came here to tell a couple in particular. So why don't you kind of set the stage for us?
Let's start with the we'll call it the hospice book. So
Oh,
I
my
was
goodness. All
hunting,
right.
yeah. So I was hunting this particular buck in this area, and it's a pretty small amount of acreage. I mean, maybe like 5 acres of woods. And I had seen him like on one of the last days of the season the year before. I'm like, all right, I'm like, I want to kill him next season. So went in there and found a decent tree to set up in. And as I was climbing the tree, I'm like, what is that noise? I mean, so have you ever seen the movie Lone Survivor?
Survivor. That's a military movie, right? I'm sure that I have, but I'm
Yeah.
drawing a blank right now.
So Mark Wahlberg plays Marcus Luttrell in that movie, but it's
Okay.
about Marcus's story. But at the one of the end scenes, I think his last name is Axelson, but he gets shot. He gets shot in the lungs. He's kind of going like, kind of
Yeah.
that real struggle in breathing. And that's what I heard about halfway up the tree. And I'm like, what the hell is that noise? So I'm looking around, and I don't see anything. It's pretty tall grass. So
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, well, slapped another stick on the tree and climbed up it. And I seen this tail flickering on the ground about 30 yards away from the tree. And so I kind of
Of
started,
course.
peeking my head around the tree. And sure enough, it was a deer laying there. Like, what the hell? So climbed out of the tree and I walked over to it. And it's this buck, probably I'd say probably 130, 135 inch buck, decent buck.
Okay. Yeah.
And he's just laying there on the ground. He's got saliva all over him, and he's just like doing that heavy struggle and breathing.
You just walked
Like,
right up to
okay,
him.
yeah, yeah. He just I mean, I walked right up to him, and the deer is alive. I mean, barely, but he's alive. And so my first thoughts are like, okay, let me look for a wound, an arrow or
Yeah.
bullet wound. So I, kind of looked him over on one of his sides, and then flipped him over. Looked on the other side, nothing. I mean, the deer has no puncture wounds or anything at all. So I'm like, what the hell? And
Huh.
he's just the entire time he's just, like foaming at the mouth.
Yeah.
And so I sat there with him for a little bit and I'm like, I don't even know what to do. And so I tried to I'm like, well, let me try to help him up, maybe he's just a little sick. Maybe he's not too terribly,
Yeah. It just
off.
needs a helping hand.
Yeah. So I grabbed him by the antlers and I with all my might, I mean, tried to lift him up and he just did not want to move. I'm like, damn. And so I kind of, sat there with him the entire evening, pretty much until it got dark, just trying to figure out what the hell to do. And so I went home, and I think that was a Friday night, because then
Yeah.
that Saturday, I'm like, let me go check in on him, make sure he's, still, or, if he didn't get up or if he ain't dead or whatever. So went in there about
Now I don't know
two.
Illinois, and hopefully I'm not ruining the story. And if I'm about to, then just say I'll get to that. But like, do you guys have coyotes in Illinois?
Yes, we do. They are thick
Uh,
as thieves.
I figured. I
Yeah,
figured.
which
Okay. I hope I'm not ruining anything here, but this is a question I had to ask.
no,
But go
you make
ahead.
a good point because I am surprised that they didn't get to him. But
Okay.
anyway, so I go in there about 2:30, and I wasn't hunting. I just went in there just to check up on him. and he was still there. Same thing, heavy breathing, and I'm like, all right, let me try to help him up. He's had all night to rest. So do the same thing, grab him by the antlers, try to lift him up, and this time he tries to get up. He kind of folds his front legs and tries to kind of push himself up, but it just
Yeah.
isn't working. And the entire time I'm kind of, it sounds a little weird, but I was kind of like petting him behind the ear just to let him know that like I'm here to help you. I'm not here to hurt you.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I went back home and thought about it some more and more. And of course, your first thoughts are to call the conservation, but I'm like, Illinois is pretty crooked as far as that goes, and I don't know how long it would take them to get there. So I figured matters were kind of in my own hands. But
Interesting. So crooked
anyway,
is in like broken roundabout way to get things done. It's just they're not very efficient, or crooked is in like you don't really trust them.
both.
Or
So
both.
like I've heard a story, a little side note real quick, that
Okay.
Illinois, I don't know who does it, but during the summertime, when deer are most active, there's a certain group of people that go out on the public lands and slaughter deer with suppressed rifles.
Okay.
Yeah, because they claim that the deer numbers are too high, which I think is BS. But whatever. Back to the story.
So you're saying
um,
the like the public office that is responsible for managing the populations, the fish and wildlife or whatever, is doing that?
I don't know if it's them because we're pretty good friends with the DNR officer that kind of manages that area, and he's like, "There's things that they do out here that are completely out of our power." So, um,
Interesting.
yeah, it's
Interesting.
kind of disappointing. But
Yeah.
anyway,
I'm
so
gonna start a conspiracy theory podcast and we'll have that guy on, but that's not for today. So continue.
yeah, so I went home that Saturday evening and kept thinking about that buck, thinking about him, thinking about him. I'm like, all right. So Sunday comes around. I'm like, I'm gonna bring some water, fruits and vegetables, try to get him to eat or drink, and a 22. And I figured, okay, if he doesn't eat or drink, or if he isn't better, I'm just gonna do what's morally right and put him out of his
Yeah.
misery.
Yeah. No,
So
that's logical.
yeah, so I went in Sunday evening and walked up to him, and he was cold, stiff. He had died, and you know, most people probably would have just kind of walked away, been like, "Oh well, that sucks." But you know, during those short couple days of just kind of pretty much being that deer's hospice nurse, um,
Yeah.
you know, I kind of got really like attached to him, almost in a pet kind of way. Like when he died, like I wouldn't be lying to you if I told you that I kind of teared up.
Yeah.
Like,
I
you
believe it,
know,
man.
we're really, as hunters, we're all connected to these animals, and to even be that connected and that close to a deer that's still living and can't do anything about the fact that you're sitting right next to him and he'd probably run if he could. It kind of got to me as far as the way he died and the amount of suffering he had to go through.
Yeah.
Who knows how long he was laying there before I got to him the first time. So it was kind of tough to see the animals that we love to hunt and harvest,
Yeah.
struggling on their own.
No, that's a super interesting point, man. I never thought about it that. And now I'm thinking about all the guys that like, they do inventory of their area and they start to name the different deer. And um I wonder if that makes more of puts more of a stake into the pot, right? Because investing you're investing in the animals more just by naming them, and let alone, trying to feed them and petting them and trying to help them. Like
Yeah,
that's a crazy story, Cole. Like I can't think of anyone I've ever talked to that's ever just like had a little deer that they went to in the woods and hung out with. That's so cool.
yeah, I know it's weird, but
Yeah. Thanks for sharing,
yeah,
man. That's crazy.
yeah,
Did
not a problem.
I don't know. It's a little morbid, but did you call it into the Department of Wildlife? Did you just leave it to lie? Did you take its antlers? Did you take its meat?
I all that went through my head, and so the first thing I did was I kind of Googled his symptoms, which Google is not the best place, but
Yeah. Right.
Google the symptoms, and the popular thing is either CWD or EHD, and he
I'm not.
didn't
I don't
really
know if I'm
have.
familiar with EHD. You mind?
Yeah, so EHD, from what I understand, is it's like a midge or like a little bot fly that when you have stagnant, really hot water, like in the summers,
Got it. Okay.
um, it's a kind of fly that breeds in there and then it gets in their noses. And
Yeah, that's gross.
yeah, it's bad. And I don't know what exactly they do to them. I don't know if they just clog all their airways in their nose or what exactly it does, but you'll find them dead a lot near water with that
Yeah.
disease.
Did he look like,
But
was his fur okay? Was he like malnourished? I mean, beyond just sitting in place for 3 days, but like,
no, he looked healthy as an ox. I mean, his hide looked good. His ribs weren't showing. He looked like a healthy deer, all things considered. And but I think it's called. I looked it up, and I think it's CHD. I think it's what it is, chronic hemorrhage disease or something like that. That was the closest thing that I could narrow down to what he had.
yeah,
But
it's
I
interesting.
was kind of iffy on whether to take the meat or not. There was a couple sources that said it's okay, and a couple of them that said it's not. So I figured,
Yeah.
I'll just let the coyotes have them. They need to eat too. So,
That's true. That's
but
true. And that's what would have happened if you had never shown up anyways. So,
yeah,
yeah, it's better safe than sorry. And it's too bad that the guy didn't get the chance, but who knows? Maybe, you think about it. Maybe he was healthy and he walks by 5 minutes after you climb that tree and you shoot him. So it's
yeah,
like,
right,
it's
yeah,
a, it's a,
yeah.
it's a weird world we live in, man.
Oh yeah, yeah. You never know what could happen right around the bend. After you see a deer, or he could fall over dead. Just after seeing him.
Yep.
But
Yeah, that's the
funny,
truth, man.
funny
That's
little,
crazy.
funny little side story to that. Whenever I first walked up on the deer the first time, the sun was kind of setting. It was getting close to dark, and I had looked behind me because you get that feeling like something's looking at you or watching you. And I
Yeah,
looked
for
behind
sure.
me, and there was the buck I was after standing next to three does.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was probably 150, 160 inch, 10 point, nice, beautiful deer.
Are you rifle hunting or are you archery hunting?
No, this is archery.
Okay. Got you, man.
But we actually, Illinois just opened up a rifle or a couple rifle calibers that you can hunt with during the gun season.
Oh,
But
interesting.
I think they're only allowing straight case or something like that. So
Man,
really, I
there's
mean,
so
they're
many
just as
rules.
effective as a slug
Yeah.
gun.
Okay. Gotcha, man. There's so many rules in so many different states.
Oh
I know
yeah.
Colorado, all right. I know Texas, all right. But then, like like I don't think in either one of those states really most calibers are good to go. Like there's not many things you can't use, but I guess, every state's different. So,
Yeah, yeah, that's the tough part too. You go out of state, you got to learn all the rules, and there might be one little rule you miss that could burn you.
oh, for sure, man. For sure. So, all right. Well, let's move on, man. So that was that was a crazy story. Nice to know that you're a dedicated hospice nurse, but what else?
So this is a deer I was after 2 years ago, and this kind of public I hunt, it's got just about every terrain that you could find from coast to coast. I mean, it's got stuff that looks like Texas. It's got stuff that looks like you know Pennsylvania with kind of hilly, open woods, and then you know, river ground timber. You got it all. But so I like to hunt the grass in this particular area. So, but anyway, I was driving around, and usually it's about 4th of July weekend is whenever our bucks kind of start getting to substantial size as far as antler growth and velvet.
Yeah.
And so I was driving around, and I looked in this area that I never really glassed before, but I seen like 25 deer down there. And it's like 600 yards off the road and down a big hill. And so I'm kind of going from deer to deer. I'm like, okay, decent buck, decent buck. And I get to this one buck, and I'm like, oh my God. I mean, he was probably 180 inches, and it was only July, like the beginning of
Wow.
July. He's
Let
still
me
got like
let
the
me ask you
whole.
this. Also, like state to state, every deer or every state is different with the size of their deer. Some not that great. Some are huge, like Iowa is known for huge deer. Where does Illinois fall into that? Because I'm not a whitetail guy, don't claim to be, but I'm trying to learn more and more about it. It's like, are there a lot of 180s in Iowa, or excuse me, in Illinois, or is that like really just crazy?
No, it's actually it's pretty typical. Like I would say Iowa and Illinois are probably neck and neck. Iowa probably
Okay.
being a tiny step above them. I don't know if it's still this way today, but I think Illinois used to be the big buck capital of I think the world.
No way. Okay. Good to know. I
Yeah,
learn something every day. Cool,
yeah.
man. Okay, continue. Sorry.
So I found this deer, and so me and Dad hunt the same, public. We constantly drive around, check different fields, and I texted him. I'm like, I just found an effing giant, and he's like, well, let me see it, because I always, say, oh, I found a giant. So he drove over, and he's like, holy crap. He's like, that's the biggest. He's like, that's one of the biggest deer I've ever seen in this park. And so I nicknamed him two names. One name I'm not gonna say because it gives away his location for sure. But
Oh,
the
okay.
second the second name I came up with him was the Patriot, because I found him on 4th of July weekend. So
That's
we're gonna
awesome.
refer to him as the Patriot. So I just got after since I once I found that deer, I got sick over him. Like I was just obsessed with him. I'm like, that's the deer I'm gonna kill. And I knew of a couple other, Boone and Crockett deer, 160s, 170s, and but I wanted that one. So, I walked that entire area multiple times. I made sure I knew it like the back of my hand, and set out a couple cameras, just to kind of see where he was living. And, with a deer's summer range, you're not really going to be able to hunt him in the same place that you see him in the summer,
Okay.
once fall comes around.
Yeah,
But
makes enough sense.
so I, set up some cameras, got a bunch of pictures of him with him and his bachelor group, which were all pretty, rock stars of deer too. But
Was he, let me ask, was
so
he like pretty typical, or was he like unique in some way?
oh no, he was pretty wicked. I think he had 18 countable points, and he
Wow.
had like just stickers going all over the place. I mean, mainframe 10, but just had all kinds of stickers on him.
That's cool.
And
Okay.
so kept walking it, tried to find the best access routes, tried to predict, where he was bedding at that point and then where he might bed, and just kept chasing him with cameras pretty much, and then glassing and, whole 9 yards. And um, to make a long story short, he moved around September, but he didn't move out of the area. He just moved like on the complete opposite end of, the area he was living in, which is probably a total of like 400 yards from where he was actually living. But he like didn't even affiliate with the side that he was staying in the summer. He didn't even go. He avoided it like the plague during fall,
Hmm.
which was weird. But probably because that's where it got the most pressure.
Got
But
it.
so there was this little triangular block of woods, and then there was a bunch of grass in front of it with some autumn olives in it and stuff. And that woods was all pretty young oak trees. I mean, just littered with acorns. And so I put a camera right at the point um, where it kind of intersects between, or where it kind of funnels down or comes to grass, like frag grass, and then the woods, obviously. And I'd get him on there probably almost every evening. And I had thought he was staying in the woods, so come opener, um, kayaked in, hopped up in a tree, never seen him, and I did that for probably 2 or 3 days. I'm like, okay, like something's up. Like I should have been on this deer by now. And so I got to talking with Dad, and he's like, why don't you look in the grass? He's like, why don't you sit right at the edge of the timber, where if he is living in the timber, you can still kill him, but you can see if he's living in the grass. I'm like, all right. So which where I set up was like right next to the tree where my camera was in. So
Uh-huh.
set up one evening, and I was hunting out of the saddle, and this limb in this tree was perfect where I could lean like literally all the way back and lay like perpendicular with that tree and just like lay down. It was so comfortable. But
Never heard of a
Anyway,
hunting spot being
so
comfortable, but that's good. Good for you, man.
yeah, absolutely. And so I'm laying there in like typical public land, like you really don't have to pay attention till the last 30 minutes, at least not where some of the places I hunt. In a roundabout way, the last 30 minutes is about your only trying chance at killing a big deer.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of laying there, not really paying attention. And something told me to just get up and look out in the grass. Like, like I said, you just kind of get that feeling. It's like you need to get your ass up and just start looking around. And so I tethered up, looked out in the grass, and there he was. He was standing there, probably about 100 yards away with a smaller buck. Beautiful, beautiful, like cherry wood red rack, just standing there. I mean, biggest deer I've ever seen with my own eyes.
That's so cool.
So I immediately got my camera, flipped it around, clicked record, zoomed in on him, and he was probably 20 yards from the field. And he was just kind of standing there looking around, stood there forever. And he was standing right next to this autumn olive bush, and I watched him lay down. He bedded down again. I'm like, I'll be damned. And then the buck he was with bedded down. And then I bet probably 45 minutes go by because he came out probably an hour and a half before light or before dark. And about 45 minutes to an hour goes by, and he finally stands back up. And I'm like, good God. I'm like, I know I'm not killing him that evening, but just the fact that I saw him, I put in all that work, and I finally laid eyes on him. And he walked out in the field. That evening ended. I climbed down, got in my kayak, and buzzed over to the boat ramp, went back to the camper, and went back to the drawing board because he was not where I thought he was living.
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right. I'm like, he's living in the grass. This is where he was standing. This was a secondary bed for sure. Where is he actually living? And so I kind of got to thinking, I'm like, well, where would I go if I wanted to avoid the most people, but see everything that I could possibly see coming around me? And in the grass, obviously you can do that, but there was a certain area in this grass because it was kind of on a slope where if he laid at the bottom of the slope, he could see that entire stretch. I mean, for hundreds of yards, he could see. I'm like, that's got to be where he's at. So I got to I had to swing around and park the other way the next evening. And make a long story short, hunted him a couple times in the grass, but finally I'm on the edge of the grass, and I'm like, finally, I just decided I needed to get in there with him.
Yeah.
Because
I was waiting for that.
yeah, he was taking too long. And so and I had made myself a ghillie suit over the summer because I figured, well, if I need to hunt him in the grass, then I will. So took my ghillie suit. It's like 100 degrees outside, and wearing a ghillie suit is terrible.
Let me ask you this: are you still archery hunting?
Yes.
Okay, so you've got like your forearm kind of strapped down so that stuff doesn't get in the way, but
yeah. So my left arm, I didn't put any jute on that, so it didn't get tangled up, and then I put like jute halfway down my right arm.
Okay.
So and I didn't put any on my chest either. But anyway, so I'm like, I need to get to this buck. It's drier than hell, so all the grass crunches. He's gonna hear me. And I need to get to that olive bush that he was at. So what I did was I belly crawled with my ghillie suit. I took my boots off, belly crawled, carried my boots with me, crawled all the way to that tree or that autumn olive bush. And then I kind of, stood there because it was tall enough and the grass is tall enough. I'm 5'6", so it covers like 2/3 of my body. But anyway, and so he comes out. I want to say probably 30 minutes before dark, and he's coming exactly where I thought he would. 30 yards away, he's gonna follow this little ditch up, and he's gonna walk right past this autumn olive bush, and I'm gonna smoke him 30 yards. And so his little buck that he uses as a sentry, it was pretty funny to see that. But anyway, he walks past me, and I could see him standing on the complete other side of this bush. And all of a sudden, I hear this truck come down the highway, and it's
Oh
probably I'm
no.
600 yards off of the highway,
Yeah.
and I hear this truck start, coming down the highway. He's got the big loud mud grips on and the loud exhaust, big diesel truck, and I'm like, no, please no, please no. I'm like, it's definitely a hunter, and he's driving, and all of a sudden, you ever hear a big truck with loud mud tires on it when it starts to slow down, it kind of goes whoa, 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 like that.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
He started doing that, and I'm like, no, please. And there's a little farm pull in where people always come into glass because everybody knew about this deer. And sure enough, that buck whipped his head up, and mind you, he's 30 yards from me still. And this guy pulls in, and I'm looking over my shoulder, and I can see him pulls in, and he could see this buck from the road, and pulls in, glasses, century buck jumps off, and then he beelines out of there just full speed to the woods, and just completely blew
That's
him out of there.
heartbreaking.
Blew my
Ugh.
blew my hunt. I mean, I had it perfect. Everything I needed to do. I was confident I was going to kill him that evening, and had him at 30 yards, like ready to draw my bow, and that guy pulls in and f's it all up. Man, I would
That's so bad.
never seen red so much in my life than when that guy
I
pulled
bet,
in and
man.
did that.
I bet. I learned something. I've mentioned this before on the podcast, but antelope hunting is like if you pull over because you see something, it's gone. Like game over. So just like keep driving. Like if you see something cool, keep driving, then pull over and come back.
Yeah,
Like on your
yeah,
feet. Like that's all the hunters out there, whether it's whitetail, whether it's antelope, elk, whatever it is. If you drive right by, they're not going to mind you because they've seen plenty of cars drive right by. But if you pull over, man, you're ruining it for yourself and possibly somebody else. Like Cole here, man. That's brutal. I assume that's the end of the story there. Is there more to it?
So I had seen that buck a couple times after that, and I had him at I think it was like 45 one evening, but it was like right at the end of shooting time, and I'm like, I am not going to take a chance on a deer like that. 45 yards right at dark. I mean, I can shoot 45 easy, but I'm not gonna risk it, not with that low light, because
Yeah.
a million things could go wrong. So yeah, but this story ain't over yet. It gets worse. So
Oh God. All right, go ahead.
so this area I'm hunting turns into refuge on the 28th of October, and then you
What does that
can't
mean
hunt it
exactly?
after that.
Sorry if I'm ignorant here, but what does that mean?
So the refuge, it turns into refuge of 28th, all for the ducks and geese. They call it a
Okay.
waterfowl rest area. That way, you're not disturbing the wildlife, but yet they let horse people rip through there all season long and disturb all kinds
Yeah.
of wildlife. But
Yeah.
whatever.
It's like in Colorado when the elk antlers start to fall, you can't go and take them out because it's illegal. But there's more more hikers and campers and shit like that than hunters by far. But the hunter's the one restricted. So I get it. Okay.
Yeah. So you know, October 28th comes around, got to close the book on that buck. So anyway, I moved on, went to some other areas where I knew a couple, big deer at, and I'm like, all right, well, maybe I can try to find you know, a buck to ease the pain on my wounds. So I hunt throughout the season, and it was kind of a crappy season, after that. I'm more successful in October as far as big buck encounters than I am in the rut. But so first gun comes around, I'm like, if that buck ventures out of the refuge, he's dead. And all he's got to do is cross the road. So my dad happened to be driving around like the last hour of first gun season, and he seen him cross the road. So we knew he was still alive. So we're like, all right, he made it through, the first war. Like, now he's got to go through World War II, second gun season. And so friends of ours down there, they hunt not too far from where this buck was, but on the side that you can still hunt. It's kind of across the road. and then you got to kind of go through some thick stuff, and then opens up in the timber again. And anyway, so they hunted in there, and his wife had shot a giant deer over there. And he was describing it to us because they lost it, couldn't find it. She made a bad hit, and me and Dad are sitting in the truck, and he's describing this deer, and verbatim he said, she said, the guy's talking about or reiterating what his wife had said. He goes, oh yeah, she said he mainframe 10 had a bunch of stickers all over him, real red, kind of kind of a redwood looking rack. And I looked over at Dad, and I'm like, that's the Patriot. I'm like, that's him. I'm like, I guarantee it. And his mouth kind of hit the floor because he knew how sick I was over that deer. And anyway, so the story goes, she had hit that buck during second gun season. I think she hit it like in the back leg, and they tracked it, never could find it. And eventually he goes, well, he's like, let me go through this one really thick, kind of a phragmite patch of grass, or not grass. I mean, I guess phragmite's grass, but anyway, so he jumps it, and these he runs, and these two or no, it was a guy and two sons. They were muzzleloader hunting, and they were walking back to their truck. And I don't really know the time frame of how all this was happening, but they were walking back to the truck, and this buck, the Patriot, runs out in front of them and stops in the middle of this gravel kind of side road. And he's like, guys, he's like, shoot it. And the two sons didn't have their guns loaded. And he's like, sorry, boys. So he raises his gun up, shoots it, smokes it, 10 rings it. And he said, when he shot him, he ran out into this lake, swam about 50 yards into this lake, and sunk.
Oh no, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah. So our friends, he's like, all right, he's like, well, he's like, I'll just I'll keep driving around every day for a couple of days after that. He'll eventually blow it up and float to the top. Well, I'm kind of thinking, well, if he's got a freaking round through his lungs, like, how's he gonna, or if he's got two wounds, two holes in his body, how's he gonna float up? But apparently they do. I don't know. But anyway, so
I guess
they
the
drove
guts,
around.
right? Like because the lungs aren't connected to the stomach, and the stomach's gonna just create gas. So maybe that, I don't know.
Yeah, true. It could be that too. But anyway, so ironically, his nephew has a scuba license and scuba gear. So towards the winter, they're like, we're gonna find this deer. So they went out into this lake, and these are strip lakes. I mean, they are deep. And anyway, so they kind of radared throughout the lake where they thought he was, and never could, find him there. So he's like, all right. He's like, well, we're gonna go in. So his nephew dumps into the water with his
I love
scuba
it.
gear, goes all the way down to the bottom. And he's like, man, he's like, and he's talking to him over some kind of radio or whatever from the bottom of the lake. And he's like, I can't find him. He's like, I can't even see my hand in front of my face. He's like, it's so murky down here. He's like, there, these weeds are so tall. He's like, he could have fell in here and kind of cocooned himself in these weeds. He's like, he could be anywhere. He's like, I could be swimming right by him, and I'll never see him. And they swam around for hours, never did find him. Mind you, the water's like, it's like 20 degrees out. Water's freezing. And anyway, so yeah, that's kind of the book on the Patriot. He's dead at the bottom of a lake somewhere.
That's so crazy, man. That is so crazy.
Yeah.
I love that they like went through. They're like, nope, this story's not done. We're getting the scuba gear out. I've seen people do that with like I lived in Washington for a while, and Lake Union is this lake just north of downtown, and people drop their cell phones in there, and they'd pay scuba divers to go down and fish out their cell phones, which is funny. But it just reminded me of that, which is crazy. It's super cool. I guess I wouldn't expect many on Lake Union, right by the coast, plenty of scuba divers. Middle of Illinois, I guess I don't know how many scuba divers are out there, but apparently at least one.
Yeah, very few probably. But
Yeah.
no, I think we got the Mississippi real close to us, and I think they do a lot of diving in that for a construction.
Okay, cool.
But Yeah, so it's funny now. Every time I see our friend's wife, I'm like, stay the hell away from me. Like, don't go anywhere near me or my
Yeah,
spots. I'm like, I don't want any of what you're gonna, any kind of bad juju you're gonna put on my deer. Like, you need to
that's too
stay the
funny,
hell
man.
away from me.
Well, I'm sorry you
But
lost the Patriot, buddy, but at least you got a good story out of it. You probably told that 100 times.
oh yeah, yeah. There was a couple big name, or not a couple. There was one guy who's a writer for a big name hunting channel, which I can tell you later, but I won't say it here. But
Okay.
he was actually going to do an article on it if we found it.
Oh, I bet, man. That would have been
Yeah, and I'm
amazing
like,
if you guys had found it.
yeah, which I told our friend, I'm like, because our friend was friends with him. I'm like, honestly, I'm kind of glad you didn't find it. I'm like, because if they did, the amount of people that would flood this place after hearing that art or reading that article, I'm like, we got
That's a good
enough
point.
people here.
That's a real good point. Yeah. Well, you know what? Another one will grow to that size, hopefully for you, Cole. But that's
Oh yeah.
God, that's crazy. I've never heard of that in my life. I've seen plenty of guys like dragging deer out of the water, but never scuba diving to fish them out.
Yeah,
How
yeah, it's
how
pretty
deep do you think
crazy.
that little river, or excuse me, that little lake was? Like if you had to guess.
I think he was said it's 60 feet all the way down to the bottom.
Damn. Okay.
Yeah, it was deep.
How far across? Like,
Um, so he actually didn't even sink into the main part of the lake. If he would have sank in the main part, that would have been impossible. But
a
it was
decent
this
sized
little
lake.
kind of, yeah. And the thing is,
Okay.
they're real long and skinny. But this area, it's not really a slough. It's just kind of kind of just like a little kickoff from it. But I'd say the area that he because there's kind of a finger that kind of came out from the lake. It was probably about, I'd say maybe 100 yards wide,
Okay.
and it just kind of
Got it.
gradually sloped all the way down to 60 feet.
Okay.
So
Got it. Cool. Cool, man. Well,
but
that's a
yeah.
great story. Thanks for sharing, man. I feel bad for you that you didn't get it, but it's still interesting. It's super interesting that they broke out the scuba gear.
Yeah, I know,
But yeah,
it's
I know you. Go ahead.
it's crazy, like, just you hear about people's deer that disappear on them all the time. It's like the amount of things that a deer probably goes through after you see it, like I said earlier, like, a million things can happen to that deer after you see it. You like, it's just crazy the amount of things that,
Yeah.
a
I wonder if
deer could
that's like
go
a
through.
natural thing where, like, when people can't find deer, if there is water nearby, that's where they run to. Like for some reason they think safety, and they end up doing that often. I don't know.
Yeah,
Just a thought.
probably, because like, you hear all the time of people, every time somebody's hunting near a river or a creek or even a lake, they
Yeah. Right.
often find their deer in it. So I bet that happens a lot.
I bet so. I bet so. But Cole, man, I know you teed it up with having two stories that you hope never happen to anyone. I'm assuming those are those two. So you got another couple quick good ones for us. Hopefully you come away with the animal in one of these stories.
Yeah, so this next story is actually a success story. Thank
All
God.
right.
But so this is a deer. This is actually the one I killed this past fall. We called him high and tight because he's real kind of narrow, but he was real tall, and we actually knew about him last year or 2 years ago, and I was gonna kill him then. He was probably 150-inch deer. I'm like, I'm gonna kill him, and I knew about him late in the season. Hunted him, never did find him. Kind of forgot about him, and we got him on camera in the summer in Velvet, and we're like, oh my god, he completely blew up, and just awesome looking deer, and daylighting in this area pretty frequently, and so we all kind of, me and my dad and a friend of ours, we were all kind of, hunting him kind of half-assed, and so this was, um, I killed him opener. That was a Friday gun season, and Thursday. So last that fall, I had set up my college classes where I worked Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then Tuesday, Thursday. I got out of class at like 10 a.m. So Thursday rolls along, get out of class, and it's really cold, windy, just shitty kind of weather, the kind of stuff that you really don't want to go deer hunting in, but you probably ought
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, probably the best
And
weather to hunt in.
yeah, exactly. So and I had a cell cam in the area of high and tight, and then I had a cell cam in a completely other part of, public. And I'd gotten this buck on there like the second I got home. It was like probably 11 o'clock. I'm like, holy shit, deer are freaking moving today, because I had a couple other small bucks, throughout the day moving around. And I'm like, I'm gonna go down there and hunt. I originally wasn't going to, so I'm like, I'm gonna see if that deer, runs a doe around. Maybe it can run by me again. And so I boogie down there, and it's probably like an hour drive from my house to the public we hunt. And so I climb into this tree, or not really climb into this tree. Actually, I had my stand like 8 inches off the ground in this little bush. But so I'm sitting there, and the trail is like 8 yards from me. I mean, it is close. And my camera's on my left. So kind of a, little technology cheat code there. If anything was going to enter that woods, because they crossed the road and then boom, they're into that woods. I'm like probably 50 yards from the road. And if it goes off, I'm like, all right, something's coming. So, but I'm sitting there, and I hear this, grunting. And I'm like, oh shit. I'm like, it's either him or another one of my target deer I'm after. And here comes this big, big 6-point deer. And we have a 4-point rule for this piece of public, where we can't kill anything unless it has 4 points on one side. So
Okay.
I immediately draw back, because I think it's a different deer. And he runs by or walks by, and he's, cruising for does. So he's on a pretty decent trot. And he stops, kind of looks around. He has no clue I'm there. And I'm at full draw on him, 8 yards. And he's probably, I mean, just a real wide, gnarly looking 6-point. I definitely would have shot him if it wouldn't have been for that rule, because he was an old deer. And anyway, so he walked
Is
off.
that like an actual law, or is just like a unspoken rule between you and the other folks that hunt there?
No, it's the rule. It's public land.
Okay.
So that's the rule for that park. And
Gotcha.
all the parks in Illinois have different rules and stuff, as far as, point limits or whatever. But so I had to let down on him. Sat there the rest of the evening, and High and Tights area, which is on the other side of this unit or area, I was going to go there too. There was either that spot or the spot I was in. And I get a notification on my phone from this area that High and Tight was staying in. I called it the middle finger, because it was just this middle little finger in this big, wooded area.
Yeah.
And it was High and Tight. He was chasing a doe, and he ran right by my camera with his tongue out. It was a pretty cool picture. But I'm like, God damn. I'm like, if I would have been there, I could have smoked him. And sat there the rest of the evening in my spot, didn't see anything.
Of course.
So now it's the evening before opener. And I'm like, well, High and Tight really hasn't been in the middle finger. He's kind of been off in this other area. I'm like, I'll just go sit in the middle finger opening morning, see what happens. And I'm the kind of guy where I like to be sitting, like, situated and in the stand or in my spot at least an hour before shooting time. Sometimes an hour and a half. But anyway, so I get there pretty late, or at least late to my standards. I'm still there like a decent time before shooting time. And so I got in my head that I was late when I really wasn't. And I was kind of looking around. It was dark. I haven't really hunted that area. And I had my hang on my back. I'm like, where do I go? I'm like, if I go here, I'm kind of out in the open, but I can see everything. And if I go here, I'm covered, but I can't really get any shots. And so finally I look over at this deadfall, and it was like this, tree had kind of forked out about halfway up it, and it had fallen perfectly where there was a tree like right in the crotch of it. I'm like, I'm going to put my hang on right there. And so I walked up the deadfall, put my hang on in it. I'm probably like 3 feet off the ground. And
Yeah.
if I sat up on my seat, I couldn't shoot this trail. But if I sat on my platform, I could. So I'm in these, it's cold. It's like 15 degrees. I'm in these heavy bibs. I hate wearing bibs. I'm, all layered up, looking like the kid from Christmas Story. And so I'm sitting on my platform. I got my feet propped up on the deadfall. Daylight comes, and I think there was one tiny little, spike that had walked by me, and nothing. And I am in no situation to shoot anything at any trail besides maybe right in front of me because I'm right-handed and the trail's on my right. So I got to do some weird acrobatic shit to turn and shoot. So I'm sitting there, and I text my friend because he's hunting not far away. It was about 7:30. I'm like, "You see anything?" He's like, "Nope." I'm like, "All right." So then I hear a shot over on his direction. I'm like, "You shoot?" He's like, "Nope." I'm like, okay. So anyway, I'd say about 8:30 comes around. And I'm like, screw it. I'm like, I'm gonna do a little calling because I have a lot of success with calling, deer calling.
Okay.
And so I'm like, all right, and my biggest thing is I don't call at deer. I don't try to, you know, make it sound like I'm trying to talk to any kind of deer. I'm just trying to sound like deer doing deer stuff. So
Gotcha. Well, that makes sense, man.
and being it's the rut, I'm like, all right, I'll just kind of do what they call a doe estrus bleat. I don't know if it's that actually exists or not, if there's a different kind of bleat, but that's what I did. I got a little extinguisher call. So I did that and then waited a couple seconds and did it again because what I've noticed is that when you call deer, like I've, even calling deer that I can see, is that you can call at them and they'll hear you, but they might not know exactly what they heard or might not know exactly where you're at. And so then they'll kind of go, and then they'll put their head back down and continue doing what they're doing. So I've
Yeah.
learned to, once you call and you get their attention, do it again, but make sure they're not so close that they can tell where you're at, exactly where you're at. So
Okay.
I
Yeah.
do those two little doe bleats, and I bet maybe like 5-10 minutes later, I hear snapping through this you know, thick, kind of like a hedgerow looking thing, real thick honeysuckle undergrowth. And I see High and Tight. He's bobbing his head, weaving his head through the brush. And I'm like, shit. I'm like, I'm not even ready to shoot. And I'm like, I didn't even expect to see this deer. I'm like, it's 8 a.m. I'm like, I lost hope like an hour ago. And anyway, so he comes up and he stops. And I'm like, shit. And so he kind of looks around because it kind of broke out in the open area I'm sitting in, and I am by no means in any kind of cover. And he looks around and he can kind of tell something's up. Like he's like, something's out of place here, something's here that shouldn't be. And so he kind of walks, or kind of trots a little bit into this thick stuff, and I can still kind of see his silhouette. And as soon as he looks over to his left, I kind of swing around and I'm in a really weird, funky position. And I swing around and get my gun on him. And I'm like, man, I'm like, if you can just take a couple more steps, I can probably squeeze around through that hole in the brush. And he takes a couple more steps, and now he's looking around. He's looking dead at me, bebopping his head through the brush, trying to pick me out. I mean, I am made. And finally, I'm like, screw it. So I kind of leaned out, and then he peeked his head up, and I had a perfect shot right behind his shoulder. I shot, the deer drops. I'm like, oh damn. I'm like, well, I'm like,
Awesome.
maybe I just spined him because he's so close. I got a slug gun that's sighted in for 100 yards, and I shot him at like 11. And anyway, so he drops. I'm like, oh shit, I'm shaking, like a leaf, and I called Dad. I'm like, I just shot High and Tight, and he's like, oh, he's like, sweet. He's like, you walk up to him yet? And I'm like, no. I'm like, he's still alive. I'm like, I think I spined him. He's like, we're putting it around in him. And so I walk up to him, rack another because I got a Savage 220, racked another, slug into the barrel, and shoot him again in the lungs. I'm like, what the hell is that red spot on his neck? And so I walk over to him. In the original round, had deflected off of a branch and smoked him right in the neck and dropped him. I mean, hit him perfectly where you should in the neck
Yeah.
if you wanted to
No
shoot a deer
way.
in the neck. Yeah. I'm like, I got lucky. And anyway, so I'm called dad and I'm like, all right, I'm like, he's dispatched. He's like, is he as big as as he looks on camera? I'm like, and I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, he's kind of buried in the weeds. I was kind of still kind of like shaken up. I'm like, what the hell just happened? So I pulled his head out of the weeds and I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, yeah, I'm like, he's everything that the camera made him out to be. And so anyway, long story
What'd you
short, we
score him
get
out
him.
to when you finally got the final score on the guy? What'd you score him out to?
So we scored him out at 166, and I'm like, there ain't no way. I'm like, there's no way that deer's 166 inches. I'm like, it looks like it's probably 155. So I scored him again, and I got like 148 or 147 or something like that. And I'm like, oh no. I'm like, because I had told myself I am not shooting a smaller deer than the one I already have on the wall, and that one's 146. And so I'm like, no. I'm like, damn it. And anyway, he's like, that cannot be right. He's like, how did we get such a different number? And so when he scored it, he counted the tines and counted that into the score. And then I don't know, it's come a couple other different math mistakes. I'm like, all right, I'm like, I'm gonna score him 3 times and I'm gonna take the average of all those scores. So I think I scored him at like 167 one time. I scored him at 163 and then 164. And I'm like, okay, I'm like, you know, I got 163 and 164. Those are pretty damn close to each other. I'm like, so let's go
Yeah.
with 164. So because I think it was like 163 and 7/8 or some shit. But yeah, so 164. And the bummer about it is his brow tines are super long. And if his brow tine, he was missing one because he got in a fight with a buck.
Oh
If
yeah.
he would have had that brow tine, he would have been 172 inches.
Woo. That's awesome, man.
Yeah. And the funny thing is he lost that brow tine like a couple days before I shot him.
Oh
Because
really?
a couple days before that, we got some snow and we got a trail camera picture of him in the morning coming to a camera with both of his brow tines. And then in the evening, we got him coming back the same way he came and he was missing a freaking brow tine. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, I'm going to scavenge this place looking for that damn brow tine.
Yeah, right.
But,
Man,
I'm like,
that's awesome.
I'm like,
That's crazy. So I've killed one whitetail, and I want you to score it for me, Cole. I'm gonna throw the camera on here later. It'll be after we're done recording, but
all right, for sure.
yeah, man, it's that's cool. I don't know anything about whitetail scoring. I've been whitetail hunting once, because I'm a late onset hunter here, and I've done mostly elk and western big game. So, but I'm now in Texas, so now I'm like fully embracing it. And I'm like, let's dive into this thing, because if
Oh
80%
yeah.
of the country, if like that's their preferred hunting, let's do this thing. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna get there, man. But I'm gonna show you this deer that I've shot, and I've told this story before. I don't know if you've heard it, but I think he was a giant of tomorrow. I think he was actually a pretty young deer, but he's super super wide. We'll talk about that later. But I know you said you had maybe one more story, or is that all you got for us?
Yeah, let me check in my notes here. I actually wrote down a couple notes to make sure I, got them all. Let's
Yeah.
see here. Oh, I'll tell an elk story. So
Oh hell yeah! All right.
so me and my buddy, funny thing is, my name's Cole, and the buddy I took to Colorado elk hunting with me, his name is Cole. So we had team of Coles going on.
Yeah. Right.
But we were there. We went up to northern Colorado, got on a couple, actually we got on bulls the first day.
Archery or rifle?
Archery.
Okay.
So we had gotten there like the opener of muzzleloader, I think. And yeah, first time, young blood elk hunters, and we got on 3 different bulls the first freaking day. We never did see them, but we had them pretty close.
That's not normal, but that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, no, hey, that luck quickly wore out.
Yeah.
But anyway, so long story short, we ended up moving like 3 hours a different direction to go elk hunting after, we had met up with some Ohio kids that were around our age and ended up becoming good friends with them. And we're actually going turkey hunting with them in Kentucky I think the 5th of May.
That's awesome.
But yeah, it's pretty cool to meet people out there. But anyway, so
You
after
actually,
they
you know what?
left,
I'm
because
gonna I'm gonna interrupt you real quick to tell a funny story. So I went third season rifle hunting. We're talking about meeting people out in the woods. And I am talking to some random guy. We're standing in our trucks and there's snow everywhere. It's miserable. It's cold. And the guy's like, "Yeah, I'm from Amarillo, Texas." And I'm like, "Oh no shit. Do you know Phil Wise?" And Phil's been on my podcast. He was actually just on my podcast. Like, "Oh yeah, I do." And it's just like crazy who you run into. So like I ended up running into Phil's buddy like in the middle of nowhere. And now Phil and I are like good buddies, and we've been friends since. But it's crazy, like you said, with those boys from Ohio. It's crazy who you can run into, and as long as everyone's got a good attitude, man, it's nothing but positivity out there.
oh yeah, it's awesome. Everybody's super helpful. Even the locals. I expected the locals to be like me with the locals, or like me when out of staters come here to deer hunt. I thought they would be a little more like me, like, I ain't giving you any information. But they were really, really forthgiving. And I was surprised by that. And it kind of changed the way I treated out of staters when I came back home. Cause I'm like,
That's
they're
good to
spending
hear, man.
a lot of money to come up here and give it their best because they aren't in an area that had big deer. So, I've kind of took it upon myself to give them some pointers now and just kind of
That's
be more
awesome.
helpful.
That's what we need. That's what we all need to do, man. It's like just being positive and just being friendly. Like there's no reason to be
Yeah.
like difficult, I'll say. But that's good to
Yeah.
hear that the Colorado folks out there inspired you to take some of that like goodwill and take it back to Illinois. So, but yeah, continue, man. I keep interrupting.
Yeah. No, you're good. So anyway, we were hunting this unit that was really, I mean, it was plentiful with roads. And believe it or not, we actually, seen a good 5x5 cross the road. We had 4 people on one four-wheeler, which was hilarious. But anyway, after the Ohio guys left, it was just me and Cole, and we kind of struggled for a little bit for a couple days. We'd uh we'd hear elk bugling at night or in the morning, and we'd kind of chase them around in the morning, never really seeing them, but always kind of trailing behind them, and then we'd lose them during the day, never could find them, and like we were just losing hope. And I'm like, you know what? I'm like, screw this shit. I'm like, I'm gonna treat these elk like I do deer hunting at home. I'm like, I'm gonna find the dumbest freaking places, and I'm gonna go to them. I'm gonna find the one tiny little freaking plot, or the tiniest out of the way place that you could go, and we're gonna go there. And so we drove
Good
on the
strategy,
complete
man.
other side of this unit and went down this shitty ass road. I mean, I would never take my truck down it again. But anyway, we get there in the evening, or mid afternoon. We're like, all right. We're gonna go to this little pocket. I'm like, there's gonna be a bull in this pocket. I'm like, I know it. I'm like, he's got water there. I'm like, there's regrowth right here. I'm like, it's green. I'm like, it's shaded. There's no reason why an elk should not be there. And it's on a, kind of a north slope. I'm like, there's gonna be an elk. It's gonna be over there. He's like, yeah, whatever. Because he was, we were both pretty down in the dumps. But
Yeah.
anyway, so we walked there and we're walking through just thick regrowth, like with the like regrowth aspens, so they're real short and thick, and kind of like looks like bear country. Well, we're gonna run into a black bear or something, but we never did. So we go up and over, up and over, up and over all these little tiny fingers that come off of this main mountain ridge, and finally we get probably 200 yards from that block of timber. I said, "Here comes our bugle." He kind of rolled his eyes, and I I took my external read cow call and went here, and then and I'm like, holy shit! I'm like, it actually worked. I'm like, I just manifested a freaking elk right there. And we're like, awesome. And so we immediately, like, being young dumb elk hunters, we immediately set up, and then I heard Chris Rowe's voice in the back of my head going, doorway. And I'm like, no. I'm like, we gotta go. So we went down this freaking drainage and then set up again. And the elk had bugled a couple times before then. He was closing distance fast.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting in these little tiny little cedar trees, probably maybe 4 feet tall, and we're at the bottom. So he's going to be coming up and over us to kind of, he's going to have to look down to us. And I remember as soon as I set up, I heard Chris's voice in my head again go, doorway. And I'm like, shit. I'm like, this is not where I need to be. I'm like, what am I doing? But it's too late. The elk is so freaking close to us. And like, as soon as I kind of like wrapped my head around the big F up I just did, I see freaking Rack coming up over the hill. And it's a beautiful bull. I mean, I'm not really good at field judging elk yet, but just
Yeah.
from watching a bunch of different videos and stuff, I think he was probably around a 300 incher.
No shit. That's awesome.
But
Over the counter
yeah,
unit.
yep, yeah, over the
That's
counter.
awesome.
And I'm like, oh my god, first elk I've ever called in. Cal called him in, didn't bugle at all, and he comes up over this hill. And as soon as I see his rack, I just draw. I'm like, because I envisioned him just walking down the hill right to me. And he comes over the hill and does exactly what I had learned on Chris Rowe's podcast and everything. He got to where he could see where that elk should have been, and he looked around and he said, "There ain't no damn elk here," and turned around and walked away. I had him at 60 yards. He was, complete frontal, and I'm like, I am not taking a 60-yard frontal shot.
Yeah, that's a tough
And
shot.
but I was at full draw, and I'm like, oh my god. And so he walks off, and it was funny the way the sun was setting. These little tiny cedar trees off to my right, the sun had projected his shadow onto those trees, and I could see a perfect bull elk silhouette just walking away out of my life. I was watching his shadow walk away through the cedar trees, and
like
then
the end of a movie.
yeah, and then he disappeared into the freaking timber again. I'm like, I'm not going to chase him again. We'll just back out. But yeah, no, like it reminded me of I don't know if you ever played Red Dead Redemption 2. The end of the
I have.
game, it was like the end of the game where it's got that whitetail buck in the sunset. I don't know if you've
Yes.
gotten to that
Yes.
part, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's what it reminded me of. I'm like, oh my god, that was so cinematic. But I
That's
was
pretty cool,
jacked.
man. Yeah, man. So how many years ago was this hunt?
So this is actually this past September. That was my first
That's
first ever
awesome.
elk hunt.
Are you going back this September?
Oh yeah, for sure. I it was funny. I was talking to Dad a couple of days before that. It was actually no, probably 2 days before that. So not, well, probably a couple. But anyway, I told him, I'm like, yeah, I'm like, I don't know if this elk hunting's all what it's cracked up to be. I'm like, this sucks. And it was funny after I called that bull in and I had that encounter. I called Dad. I said, I am doing this every freaking year. I said, I don't care if I got to adjust the job I do for a living to make sure that I can do this every year. I said, I have got to do this every year.
That's awesome, man. That's so cool to hear. Like someone that's come up from the whitetail side, just being as enamored with the elk hunting. So I didn't grow up hunting at all, Cole, and it's like the first time I saw a bull bugle, and my brother-in-law and I both shot the same elk, and we put it down. I was like, "What is this monster in the woods?" And I've just been in love with it ever since. So it's cool that you just were like, "Yep, this is it. I'm changing my life for elk hunting." That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, like my friend Cole, we had gotten on I think a couple other bulls since then or after that. And anyway, that one was pretty close. He was probably 50 yards, but he was through some thick stuff, and they were kind of all looking our direction because they had heard elk there but couldn't see any elk. But anyway, after that, he's like, man, he's like, these things almost look out of place. Like they are so huge that they look
Yeah.
like they shouldn't even be there. Like
Right?
they should be in Jurassic Park or something.
But absolutely, man. Never mind the fact that like they have ivories, right? So they've got the teeth that people pull, and an ivory is a remnant of years and years and years ago when they had tusks. Can you imagine
Yeah.
that shit? These giant swords on their head and coming out of their mouth at the same time. Like they're
Yeah.
insane. They're beautiful. I love them. They're my favorite critter in the world.
Yeah,
If only
it's
my wife would let me name my kid Wapiti, right?
yeah, no joke. Maybe a dog. You can name a dog
Maybe.
Wapiti.
Maybe,
or a
maybe.
cat.
Actually, I mentioned that, and she's like, "What? Wapiti?" I'm like, "Yeah, WAP." She's like, "Nope, nope. That song has been ruined by I don't even know the rappers, but the WAP. I don't know if you know
Oh
what I'm talking
yeah,
about here.
freaking
The
Cardi
I'm just
B.
gonna
Oh
say it.
yeah, that's
Yeah, wet ass pussy. Like, God, who
oh
is that?
yeah, that's Cardi B,
Oh,
I think.
Cardi B. I wanted to say Lizzo, but
Yeah,
I'm really not. I'm not versed in all that stuff. But my wife can't get that out of her mind. She's like, "No, we
yeah.
can't name our dog something that starts with WAP." Like, nope. No.
I like the way that Guy Du is it Guy Duplancher or Guy Duplanche?
Second one, the planche. I get it wrong too.
Duplanche.
It's a beautiful
So
name. It's a hard name.
oh yeah, I love the way he says Wapiti. He's always
Yeah,
like he puts really a lot of emphasis on the WAP.
yeah, yeah. Well, he's from California. That's those Californians too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, cool, Cole, man. These are some great stories, man. I appreciate it. I think I've taken up more time than I asked for already. So
Oh
if you
no,
have
I
any
got all
more,
the time in the world.
perfect. Do you have any more stories you want to tell? Otherwise, man, it's a good point to wrap up. You tell me, man.
Um, yeah, I could tell, I guess, one more quick one about making sure to keep track of your stuff in the woods. So I was hunting this deer. This was this past season, and hunting him in the grass again. Hunted this cedar tree. It was a couple hundred yards from the road, and had to walk through a couple hundred yards of grass. And the grass is probably waist high. And then below that waist high grass is like the old grass that folds over from the wind and the snow and everything, and creates like
Yeah.
an upside down nest over the entire landscape. So, typical lock your truck, put your keys in your pocket, walk on. So I get done with the hunt in the evening, and every time I climb out of the tree, I usually always do a pat check on all my pockets, make sure I got everything. And
Yeah. Sounds
so
familiar.
walked about 5 yards away from the tree, and I'm like, something's missing. And so I start digging through my pockets, can't find my keys, and I'm like, oh
Oh
no.
no.
And so I get my flashlight out, start looking around, retrace my steps back to the tree, look around the tree, couldn't find him. I'm like, oh my God. So, I kind of walk back to the truck. I'm like, I'm not even going to try to look in the grass right now. It's pitch black. I'm like, I can't find, my keys are just gone. I'm like, okay. I'm like, well, let's have some hope here. Maybe I just left the keys on my tires, because sometimes I set my keys on my tires when I'm getting my stuff ready. I'm like, all
Yeah.
right, maybe I just did that. Get back to the truck, no keys. Like, all right, well, maybe I just left the keys in the ignition. Maybe I just forgot to lock my truck. And so I go to open the door. Nope, can't open the door. I'm like, oh my God. So my friend from Tennessee was actually up here deer hunting. He comes up here every year. And I called him. I'm like, hey, what are you doing? He's like, no, just driving around. I'm like, can you pick me up? He's like, yeah. He's like, what's the problem? I'm like, I lost my freaking keys. He just starts laughing. He's like, yeah. He's like, where are you at? So I told him, get back to his place, and I'm talking to him, and he's like, so what are you going to do? I'm like, well, I got a couple things I need to do. I need to have somebody drop me off there first thing in the morning, and I'm going to look for my keys and do a grid search. I said, if I can't find them, I'm going to try to call a locksmith. I said, if he can't do anything, I'm going to have a different friend drive an hour from, my hometown, come pick me up, and then take me to the dealership where the truck came from so I can get a key.
Yeah.
And so his girlfriend, actually, she had to go to work real early that morning, so she offered to drop me off. So she dropped me off, and I looked, retraced my steps all the way, to my stand, or, the tree I was in. And I didn't know exactly where I walked, so I kind of, made a line on Onyx, or like an area on Onyx. It was
Yeah.
about 5 acres of stuff that I had to walk through. So I'm
Gosh.
like, well, I don't know how wide I swung at this, hill or this trail or whatever. So I grid searched the entire way, turned my tracker on, got all the way to my tree, looked around my tree, couldn't find it. I'm like, I'm screwed. And so I just kind of sat down on the ground and kind of leaned back on my elbow. And I'm just thinking, I'm like, man, you are one idiot. And anyway, so um I looked over my left shoulder, and there are my keys, because I had a little gold Trump keychain on there. My parents got me a Trump keychain when they went to Vegas. So, and it was like
Right.
sitting there kind of shining, in the little bit of the light that the grass let through. And I'm like, oh my God. I mean, you would have thought I freaking found gold. And so,
Thank you,
yeah,
45.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, found my keys and got back to my truck and rolled off. But little moral of the story is, keep track of your keys and don't take your keys out in the woods.
That's
Bury them
so
in the
funny,
grass
man.
or something near your truck.
That's funny. That's so funny. So, man, that's like you hit on one of my biggest fears. Like I've never lost my keys, but for some reason, I'm just like terrified of it. So one thing I bought a long time ago, actually, my father-in-law bought one first, and I was like, "That's the smartest shit I've ever seen." Um, I don't know if you have a truck or what you're driving, Cole, but if you have a hitch, they make hitch safes, and it basically just tucks into your hitch, and then you put these little pins in there, and it's got a little sleeve. And so I bought one of these things, right? And I would always have like a $20 bill and my spare key in there. So if I lost my keys, I always had my keys on the truck, always there, no matter what. Because it's just something. I don't know why I'm terrified of it, but I am. Either way, I
Oh
went to
yeah.
TAC, if you know TAC, Total Archery Challenge. And for whatever reason, I took that thing out and set it on my bumper. I don't know why. And then I drove away,
Oh
and that thing
no.
just was lost into the wilderness.
Oh
Um,
no.
and so my key is still safe, I'm sure, but it's locked up in this hitch that's lost in some grass somewhere in Colorado. I really no idea. But since I don't know why I haven't bought another one. Mainly because I didn't didn't get myself a second key, which is probably a bigger problem. But I've
Well, I
got
tell
like
you what.
3 different like magnetic key holders. And so when I go out elk hunting, I will not take my keys with me. I'll like have it's like a puzzle piece where like you have to come to
Yeah.
this part of my truck and find this piece to take it over to here to unlock that piece to so yeah. I'm with you. Your story sent shivers down my spine, man, because it's like
Oh
one of
yeah.
my biggest hunting fears is to go back to the truck. And I don't know how cold it is on that day you were hunting, but like I'm not hunting within hours from home. Like I'm camping or I'm in my camper or whatever. And so like if I can't get in my truck, the temperature's dropping below 30s. It means life or death potentially. So like, yeah, I'm with you, man.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
with you. That's
Yeah,
terrifying.
absolutely. Yeah, I tell you, what you can do is you can just drop me a pin exactly where you lost your keys in Colorado, and I'll find them for you.
Dude, there's no keychains. It's just black, no Trump shininess coming at you. Um, but yeah, I'll send you the pin. It's on private property. I'll get you access to it. It's not a big hunting property, but a good one for camping. So
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
cool, man. Well, this was fun, bud. You had some very unique stories. Most of them involve heartache, so I'm sorry, but at least I'm glad you found your keys, and I'm glad you killed your what did you call it? What did you call your the tall tined deer?
Oh, high and tight.
High and tight. I have another buddy, and as soon as you said high and tight, I was thinking Timmy Tall Tines, which is what he called his similar deer. So,
That's a good
man,
name.
it is a good name. Feel free to take it. I mean, I don't own it. I hope he doesn't. I hope he's not upset with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, Cole, man, why don't we? I don't know if you want to share, any where the people can follow you. I can't guarantee any followers. I think only like 6 people listen to this podcast, but if you if you want to throw your Instagram out or anything else you might want to, please feel free, and then we'll wrap this thing up and get about our evenings. But thank you again, man. This was awesome.
Yeah, for sure, not a problem. Thank you. And yeah, so if you want to follow me on Instagram, it is just Cole.Gard, and that's Gard. There is no U. And I also have a second Instagram page. It's called Illinois_artifacts. I'm a big artifact hunter too. And so I
Okay.
post all of my arrowheads, knife blades, anything I find out in the creeks or in the fields, that'll be on that page. So
Oh,
if you want to give
cool.
that page a follow too.
Yeah, man. Share that one with me. I'll put both into the show notes. So if you guys want to check out the cool shit that Cole's finding, and also just kind of check out his life as he goes about just shooting giant deer in Illinois, then you can just click there and follow him along. So Cole, man, thanks again, buddy. This was fun.
Yep, thank you. I appreciate it too.
Yeah, buddy. All right. Have a good one. All right, guys. that's it. Another couple stories. I want to thank Cole, of course, for coming on the podcast and sharing all his stories, his whitetail stories, his elk stories, turkey stories, whatever it may be. We thank you very much for first off reaching out and then coming on and sharing those stories. So that being said, guys, make sure you take it to Cole and share the podcast with some other individuals and reach out to us if you have some stories of your own. So we'd love to hear them, and we'd love to get them out here on the podcast so others can hear them as well. All right, guys. Well, beyond that, make sure you follow Cole on Instagram. It is just cole.gard, Gard, and then Illinois_artifacts. I'm going to put links to all that stuff in the show notes so you can find it pretty easily. But that's it. Thank you again for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. And now get out there and make some stories of your own. Thank you.